All right, so we got Dustin Pease on the podcast today. Thank you for coming on, Dustin. Um, I have to admit, last week I've been becoming a Location Nation nerd, kind of. I've just been all over this stuff because it's really intriguing. It's really different. Why don't you tell your story real quick? Just why did this come about? I've been reading about your career, but let people know what you're all about.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me on. This is my first podcast, by the way, or at least guest podcast. The last time I did a podcast was when I was still playing with San Diego, and somebody was just trying to ask me more about my career. But, Location Nation, it kind of just came to me one night, last summer, actually. But I've had a lengthy career where I just was a guy who was a low-velocity guy, how to find ways to make that work. Location and command were basically the staples of what gave me a career in baseball. What gave me success, But the idea of Location Nation kind of happened a year after I was coaching Division I at Mount St. Mary, which was my alma mater. I spent 2 years there coaching, a little bit more than 2 years, coaching a Division I pitching staff. And, it was good. We made a lot of positive adjustments when I was there. And we definitely made some improvements on the pitching side. But a lot of the issues I was running into when I was there at the Mount was guys, struggling to understand the importance and concepts of what it truly means to command your pitches, what it truly means to locate, and just how much more successful you could be if you dedicated a lot of your time to command and locations, and understanding the importance of how certain locations can help you be successful. So a lot of those guys just wanted to continue to throw it as hard as they could, and some of them, the results suffered greatly. And my ultimate goal of Location Nation is to get through to more pitchers. I don't want to see guys fail. I ultimately just want to see more pitchers be successful.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, it doesn't always jive with the way the culture is nowadays.
I gotta say, you just right there is what I've sort of been. I haven't been able to put my finger on it, but been thinking for the past few years, because players have gotten velocity nuts, and like you said, it's about being successful and getting guys out. The baseball isn't an Olympic event called throw as hard as you can. It's how can you get guys out. And the culture has definitely shifted towards, in my opinion, scouts almost don't care enough about that. And just, all right, can the guy hit 90 on the radar gun? All right, we can turn him into something. When rarely you see that happen because they don't know how to teach location, which you're absolutely correct.
I was just talking to a guy this morning. The name might ring a bell. His name is Mike Venafro. And we were talking about the same thing. You scout these guys, and it is. It's kind of like it's a must. Get these guys that are throwing whatever age they are. Their speed is relative for whatever their age is, 90, 88, depending on your age, 95, and they're hoping that the development can turn them into a guy who can locate command. And after playing for all the years I did within the independent ball, and then 2 years in affiliated, and then the 1 year with Kansas City in spring training, it just doesn't typically translate as well as they hope it will.
Exactly. They think training command and location is a given. Like, that's an easy thing to do, when really it's not, and which is what you've proven is it needs a process, which is what I see Location Nation is about.
Right. The other important part of what I'm doing is I think a lot of people get very confused with my mission, is they think that I don't care about velocity when that's not exactly true. It's completely necessary when you pitch. You need to throw it at some speed. Again, I think, and the speeds are relative. The velocity that you're throwing is relative across whatever level you're playing at. I think on the low end, and a lot of people like to compare it to Major League Baseball. I like to compare it to just being successful in general. But if you can throw in the low to mid 80s, you could be successful in a Major League Baseball game. I think a lot of people.
We've seen them.
Yeah, you've seen them. They've existed, but people will refuse to give those stories credit. They'll kind of cast them out as anomalies or exceptions.
Yeah.
But you can't do that when they've actually existed and they've proven that they can get people out. So, and the statistics against those types of pitchers are huge. So you can't. When I say huge, I mean there's not many of them.
Yeah.
So you can't compare what can happen to what's actually happening because the way the game is. So.
No, that's totally right on. And exactly. I never see you as a guy who's against velocity. You know, I'm active on Twitter. I see your stuff and I see people commenting, and the common comment to your tweets is just this kind of snarky, well, why can't you throw 65 and be good in the pros, when that's not what you're talking about at all, you know? But you get that comment so many times, you know, and I see that so many times and you're like, no, you're missing the point.
Right. Yeah, and I try to answer it as respectfully as I can. You know,
it's kind of hard on Twitter, but
I think I've been doing a pretty good job of maintaining my composure, talking to people on there, staying respectful, and trying to just get my point across, correctly, that they understand. You know, the speed is relative across whatever level you're playing at. If you're throwing 65, then that's good for, I don't know, a low-end high school player to a
8th grader, you know,
high school. Yeah, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're trying to get into college, you could potentially do it at mid to upper 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to say that can't be successful is also ignorant. So, I think ultimately, I just like to defend the pitchers and the idea that you can do it at a lower speed, but that's not my main goal for everyone. My main goal is to, one, make sure a pitcher wants to be successful, which includes them commanding pitches. And the second goal is to add velocity on that because it is a great complement to that core ability. I think a lot of people, for some reason, get very confused when they just see command on my bio page or my mission.
Right, yeah.
But, it's not what it's all about. I know that.
And let's talk about it real quick. Obviously, this message is resonating because we look at your Twitter followers. I don't know. I started following you maybe 8 months ago. You didn't have a lot of followers, but it's really grown, and I'm happy to see that because this message is resonating with people, and people are going, yeah, this guy knows what he's talking about, you know. And so I'm kind of glad that's growing because, overall, I'd like to see the culture change at least a little bit, from what it is now, because I think the culture's disregarding these successful pitchers because they don't throw hard or just are not putting the emphasis on the right things. And I think now you're kind of making that message clear, and now people, have a direction. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, the Twitter following is definitely blowing up. Here's the thing, and this is probably the most interesting thing of this. Everybody knows what I'm putting out there is true.
Yeah.
It's deep inside of their gut. Even if they are the biggest velocity gurus and what they know deep in their gut that it cannot sustain success without what I'm talking about.
Exactly.
And I think for what it's worth, it scares a lot of people to admit that. And that's why I get so much resistance. Well, I've been getting much less resistance lately, but that's why I feel like when there is resistance, that's what it is.
Yeah.
And, velocity is great to a lot of people, and velocity is even lots of other people's careers. But ultimately, when it comes down to my end game, when it comes to being a successful pitcher, it is absolutely necessary, especially at the highest level of the game.
Oh, absolutely.
Or
you look at major league pitchers, when you break it down, 60 to 70% of the major league pitchers are going to go into one bucket. They throw low 90s, maybe they got a few breaking pitches, but their command is just not all that great, and that's what separates them from a guy maybe Max Scherzer, Clayton Kershaw, They haven't broken that barrier. I'll watch a game with, whoever, my trainees or dad or whatever, and I'll go, yeah, that was a nice 95-mile-an-hour fastball. That was right down the middle, and that guy took it, and it wasn't at the knees where the guy was going to strike out. It's like you see that all the time.
Right. Yeah, you do see it a lot. I think a lot of people, I've seen it a lot through my career, and that's another thing it's hard to talk about because people are like, well, you keep talking about professional, you're a professional or whatever. Yeah, I mean, when you play that, if I look back in my life, in 16 years, I played 7 years professionally. You see a lot of 95. You see a lot of 90 to 95.
Especially now.
95. I've watched games every single night for 6 months. You see the pitches get hit, but when you go to look at statistics, you're going to see statistically things that don't agree with what eyewitnesses see. You know, so it's hard to prove those things through statistics. It's hard to quantify those things, but those types of pitches can absolutely be hit, and the location of those pitches, it always goes back to location. Any pitcher that says it's not about location is just lying to themselves, or they just are ignorant of the effect of the pitch.
And Dustin, I'll be honest, I myself can fall in that velocity guru bucket. I'm big on training velocity. One, because I don't know a lot about how training command, and that's why I've been getting into Lokationnation big time. But I'm working with a lot of players who, I'm working with a college guy. He's bounced around from team to team, and and he's not where he wants to be velocity, and so that's what I do. But looking at this Lokationnation stuff definitely opened my eyes to what also needs to get done success wise, and I think that's great that you've kind of opened that up. And I'm and the truth hurts. A lot of these gurus out there, the truth ain't fun all the time. That's why they're getting hurt at this. And initially when I saw your account, I'm like, what the heck's this guy talking about? But then I looked through, I'm like, this guy knows what this guy knows what he's talking about, and he's had a successful career that most players would only even dream about. I mean, let's be honest, AAA with the Padres, I was looking through all that, and being undervalued at every turn, but really dedicating himself to success. So I think that's awesome. So my next question for you, Dustin, is how can we change the culture? You started trying to help that, but what do you think are going to be some big steps to changing this velocity, power driven, and I'm reading on your website, just attribute driven culture?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think for me, for a guy like myself, and I do have the massive undertaking, and it's not anything I'm not accustomed to. I've been fighting this my entire life, trying to make it work for myself. It's kind of like rolling a boulder up a mountain. As far as changing the culture, will that ever change? Will this thought ever change? Who knows? Potentially. I mean, it's going to take a lot of interest in what I'm doing. It's going to take a lot of interest in getting the brand out there. It's going to take a lot of interest from high-profile people, scouts, professional scouts, amateur scouts, potentially front office people, to talk about these things, get people to think more about it. It would absolutely have to take a trickle-down effect from the highest level of the game, how they recruit players, as well as collegiate recruiting and how they recruit players at the highest level, which will be top-end Division I conferences, or just Division I conferences in general. But, with all that being said, there's a lot of scenarios out there that still go unnoticed, and there are players that are scouted and recruited with below average velocity. I wouldn't say there's an abundance, but they exist. These stories exist where there's guys that throw below average velocity and with great command or great attributes, maybe they have deception, things like that. There are stories that exist out there.
They're just not the sexy stories that people like to hear about.
Yeah. But to completely change the culture of the game from velocity, it'd be tricky. It's gonna be hard. It's gonna take a lot of opinions. It's gonna take a lot of testimony. But the cool thing about, I think, doing, a lot of people agree with the overall premise. They're just
exactly.
kind of afraid to put their opinion out there.
Especially since this kind of velocity driven thing is so embedded now in the baseball culture and in the industry. It's a huge industry now. I mean, we have to admit that. And my favorite thing is when I see you post a poll. Would you rather throw 100 miles an hour but can't throw a strike, or have perfect command but throw 80? And how many people hit the 100 mile an hour poll button? It's like you don't actually believe that. You're just being stubborn. I find it really fascinating and funny how much you tapped into this kind of I don't know, fear of what actually makes a good player.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's absolutely right. I mean, I guess I kind of would call it brainwashing, you know. But for what it's worth, that is what amateur culture looks at. And a lot of people also get confused when I say amateur scouting, amateur culture. They think I'm insulting people by saying they're amateurs. No, these are just people that are looking at amateur players. You know, these are just people that are recruiting amateur players, which is just a common vocabulary for amateur scouting.
Yeah, it's not an insult. It's just what it is. You know.
Yeah. I think a lot of times there's some things I say on Twitter that get a little bit confused with the context, and that's coming to be understood. But yeah, I mean, I just think again, the ultimate goal there is for guys to be like, all right, yeah, is 100 miles an hour successful? Yeah, if you're in the throw the baseball Olympics,
yeah, exactly.
is winning a game and being successful, being considered the ace of your team, successful. You know, it's a tough question for people to answer for themselves, you know. And I think a lot of people get stuck. A lot of pitchers, and this happened when I was coaching at the Mount, a lot of pitchers get stuck in this situation where they spent their whole college career trying to throw harder, and maybe they made it to 93, you know, which is still pretty average. It's still pretty vanilla, you know. And maybe they made it to that speed, and their whole career statistically they had a very bad career. Maybe they just had a very
nightmare.
At that point, you're a right-handed pitcher that can throw 93. You've fallen into a huge pool of people,
huge bucket,
and you have no statistics to back up your ability. And now that 93 person has to throw 98 if they want to play at a higher level. They have to throw 95 to play at a higher level.
Absolutely. And I think what's happening is, like you said, the players you're coaching at Mount St. Mary's is, with this generation of young people, and I'm a part of that generation, is they've been told from a young age, velocity is what's going to get you there. So, I mean, in the end goal, what do players want? They probably want a major league contract, right? They've just been told that velocity is the way to get it. And so that it's not that like they're only velocity driven. They've just been told that that's the way to get there, so that's what they're going to do. And really it's causation without correlation, you know. It's that kind of thing. And like you said about statistics, there's a baseball training approach, I'm not going to name it, where the players will train all off season, then they get signed by a team, but their stats are horrible, and then they get cut the next year. And I'm not going to name this approach, but that's exactly what you're saying. You know, they got the velocity, but they have nothing to back up the velocity with, you know. And so that's going to cause a real problem for them down the road. Right.
Well, unless there's a development system in place, which may or may not work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The major league, I mean, let's be honest here. The major league development programs in some organizations, I'm not saying all of them, are pretty lacking in almost every department, in my opinion, from what I've experienced and seen, and in college programs too. One of the college players I'm working at, you know, at the tryouts had them throw 5 days in a row. It's like some of these coaches just have no clue what they're doing, and you know, and it's hurting players and it's hurting chances, you know.
Right. I mean, it just depends on the organization. I mean, you know, some organizations may have better development systems than others. And, you know, some obviously investments play a role here. You know, if a player has more invested in him, he will have more time and attention dedicated to him with his needs. You know, so there's lots of, it's not like it's even keel for every player in the system. You know, it's a business.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's on the player as well.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's right on. And so, and then my next point that I kind of want to dive into, so he had a pretty extensive career going all the way up to spring training with the Padres. That's correct? In 2013. Okay. And so you kind of developed this approach of, you know, command, location, execution, being successful. Early on, I was reading your bio, started in high school. How did your teammates or coaches look at this approach of being so based on success? How did they look at it? How they adapt to it? Were some people like, yeah, that makes sense? Were others like, you're an idiot? I'm sure there are plenty of people who said you're an idiot. That happens with anything that's different. But if you have any stories about that, you know, kind of just describe what kind of happened. You know, how did they react to it?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately for me, you know, I took private instruction for 4 years of high school. So I had a private instructor. He was a professional person, and he was involved with professional organization. I worked with him. There was no lack of collaboration between me and my instructor and the goals that I had set in place. So with that being said, he also kind of helped out where I was with high school. So his information, his content, is rubbing off on my high school people. The culture of my high school was all very, very consistent. That helped tremendously. So there wasn't any issues with the high school. There was never typically any issues with anybody and how I was going about my business. Other than people commenting on my ability to command.
Really?
I think some people were a bit baffled by how consistent I was able to hit my spot with 3 different pitches. It went down. It obviously goes back to all the amounts of practice I did and how I kind of set up the system in my e-guide. But, it comes down to people seeing, okay, this guy's being really successful, but man, he doesn't really throw that hard, and I would consistently hear that as well. Like, yeah, if you can only throw like a few more miles an hour, there's plenty of high profile showcase teams that I was still trying out for where I just wasn't getting on these teams because I wasn't throwing hard enough. And again, you only need one opportunity. And for me, when I did get that one opportunity with that one showcase team, that was the team that led me to a Division I offer.
Yeah, and remind me where you played. Mount St. Mary's, right? Is that where you played Division I baseball? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I assumed since you went back and coached there. Well, so you didn't have a ton of opposition to strictly performing command. You just, like you said, you kind of got the snide comment, man, if you threw a little harder, that kind of thing. That happens sometimes, but. Yeah, having a consistent high school culture, like you said at your high school. I don't know how old you are, Dustin. You around 30? I don't know.
I'm 31.
Okay, so you're in high school 12, 13 years ago. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'd have to tell you because I graduated high school not too long ago how much that's changed. It's one player does this, another player does that. This guy goes to this instructor. There's no cohesive team goal, and it's actually become pretty. High school baseball has become pretty selfish. I don't know I think that's the right word. Just with how the travel ball industry's come about, some of the team cohesion's been lost, and so that I don't really like how that's kind of changed. But if you can instill a good high school culture, that's awesome.
Yeah, I run my own local business here in Maryland, Pease Baseball, and I work with I give hitting and pitching instruction here. And when I have lots of pitchers that I work with, and lots of high school kids in the Frederick area. And every time I get a kid, I reach out to their high school coach, let them know that I'm working with them, and I want to collaborate. And there's a lot of instructors. There's a lot of instructors that don't do that, and there's a lot of high school coaches that don't care to meet you.
Oh yeah.
And that is what it is. You can't make somebody want to collaborate, but my ultimate goal is to make sure that the kid is receiving consistent information, consistent thought processes, and that's what helps guys get better. Other than a guy trying to stick through all the material and figure out what's best for him, if we can be on the same page, that's ultimately a goal, but it doesn't always work. But I do the best I can to reach out to these high school coaches in Maryland and make sure we're all on the same page if they allow it.
Being on the same page is so important in my opinion, because you get some players, they have their instructor, and basically the drift between the high school / college coach or even professional coach and the private instructor like yourself, they're slowly drifting more and more apart in my opinion. So the instructor will be like, screw your coach, just do what I say, and there's no effort to collaborate when maybe that could happen. So now the player is hiding what he's doing from the instructor, from the coach, and no one's really getting anywhere doing that.
Right. Well, again, that relationship is a slippery slope between an instructor and a coach. Like I said, not all coaches are going to be open to collaboration, and not all instructors care about collaborating with their coaches.
Exactly.
So that is a slippery slope, and I had the same. I still had the same scenario growing up when I had my instructor, and I was, you're constantly going to have somebody trying to put a thumbprint on you. You're constantly going to have somebody trying to tell you something different. And, my advice to that is, and which is the same advice I received, if you're working with someone and you trust them and you believe what they're telling you and you believe that they're going to make an impact in your life as a mentor and as an instructor, then that's the person that you listen to. And you stick with it. And anybody else that tries to say something to you, you just be very respectful. Be very respectful. Yes, sir. No, sir. And keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Especially in developmental years. If you have to, if you're working with an instructor, if you're not, then sift through all the information yourself and try to figure it out. But if you found somebody that you believe is highly credible, that can give you the information you need to get to where you want to go, then you have to stay consistent as much as you can.
Absolutely.
And that's my opinion on that.
Because, what I think is another big problem, and coming from the internet, there's a ton of information, which is great. It allows you to do Lokationnation. But also the problem with the internet is there's a lot of information. And if you're a kid, if you're a high school kid, and you're not just committing to one approach, and you don't really have a loyalty to an approach, and you're sifting through everything, you're never going to get anywhere, in my opinion. When my freshman year in high school, I don't know if you know Brent Porcio, I found his program, and I really latched onto that, and I now partner with him, and I'm the Northwest representative 3X coach for the Washington area, because I love it so much. But before, me and my dad and my brother played baseball, we were just sifting through all the information on the internet, not getting better, because you're not committing to anything, you have no approach, you're just looking at everything, and to me, that's just the wrong way to go.
Yeah, you need consistent information. I think hopefully eventually a program may be interested in partnering with someone like myself because they realize the vast importance of what I'm doing. And that would be an interesting goal to partner with someone with that. Because like I said, velocity complements the ability to command. So, but within what I'm training, I'm also training guys how to increase velocity as well within the guide that I've written. So, everybody has their own different ways. I did eventually gain velocity through what I was doing.
I saw in your bio you got up to 89, I think, was what you were topping out at near the end there.
Yeah, the hardest I've ever thrown in my life, and I didn't put it on my bio, was 92. But that was throwing at a very high arm slot.
Yeah.
And it only happened 2 times in my life, so I didn't feel like to reference that would be important.
Yeah.
I might actually go. I might kind of get back on the bullpen and just light it up a couple of times and put that out there, because I find it interesting that a lot of people, they go back and forth when I read through Twitter and whatnot. All command guys, they don't know how to teach velocity. Oh, velocity guys, they don't know how to teach command.
Yeah.
I find that.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
It's okay. I find it interesting because I was able to throw the ball, get up to 92 if I threw it a high slot. I was able to throw the ball at 89, and I consciously made the decision to pitch at the speeds I pitched at because I knew where I needed to pitch at to be successful. And that location was more important than me trying to guzzle the ball in there at 88 and throw it down the middle. 88's not that fast. And if you throw 89 and you try 92, 92 is not that fast.
It didn't matter if you were going to sit 87 or 90. It's still not fast enough to blow it by guys.
Yeah, right. So, but that all that being said, you can blow it by a guy, and I have if you locate it well.
Absolutely.
And you set up your sequence well.
Absolutely. That's 100% true. If you're good at using your speeds and your location, you will absolutely always blow by guys a ton. But you're not going to do it simply on, first pitch, 100-mile-an-hour fastball down the middle. That's not going to be the approach to it. But you're still going to go, blow by guys. Like for me in high school, I was low 80s, but I could locate my curveball really well. And I blew it by guys all the time at 79 and 80. Doesn't mean I threw hard. It's just, I knew what I was doing, when it comes to sequencing and things like that.
Right.
Okay, so, and one thing I wanted to touch on real quick here is, which probably isn't, not a lot of people will want to know about, but I want to talk about your faith aspect through all this, because you're very emphasized it, and I think that was great. I just want you to talk about, for me myself being a Christian, I'm just interested what you had to say about your faith and how it helped you through all that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was immensely important for my life. It still is, still a very big part of my life. I mean, I went to a private high school. I eventually went to a private college, Mount St. Mary's, which has the grotto up there. Mother Mary is up there, and she kind of rises above the trees. I'm not sure if you've ever been there, seen that campus.
Well, I've never been to that campus, but I go to a college called St. Martin's. It's in Lacey, Washington, so it's a Catholic university.
Very cool, very cool. So yeah, I mean, I kind of stuck with that route, and I just kind of felt like when I found out the Mount was interested in me, it was just kind of like a calling, like a vocation. I felt like, okay, this is where I'm supposed to go.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Just kind of follow the path that's laid out for you. I got up there, and I felt very blessed to be on that campus in that situation with someone, with the team and coach that wanted me to be there. And I was able to. We had baseball chapel pretty much every week with the team, and I felt very comfortable in that setting. You feel like everybody's there as a team, or there as a team unit, doing team prayer and whatnot. And it's just really refreshing to be able to maintain that aspect of your life in sports. And I was able to maintain it in professional baseball as well, because they have baseball chapel. For independent ball, they have baseball chapel. For minor league ball, and it's weekly, and you get to meet with the chaplain and get to keep that part of your life in check. And it's immensely vital. And finally, I don't think I've posted this anywhere with Lokationnation, but I majored in theology with a minor in Spanish. And at two of the off seasons in between professional baseball, I was a professional youth minister at the Catholic Church for 2 years. And the year that San Diego signed me, I was finally asked to step down because I was gone for months every year. But during my time as a player, I was still able to work as a youth minister in between the seasons. I thought it was very cool.
Because I mean, honestly, for people, for all people, or for people like you and us, when you get wrapped up in baseball and you lose some of that faith aspect, for me, the drive gets kind of sucked right out of you, and you got to kind of put things back in perspective. Tell me how hard that is on the road, minor league baseball, which is dramatized as being brutal, and even Division I college baseball, like traveling a lot. Just talk about how sometimes you can lose perspective, and how you kind of gain that back and can kind of get remotivated.
Yeah, I mean, you just kind of have to go to your own. You have your own time where you kind of sit down and kind of evaluate where you are in life, and the goal, the decisions you've made, and where you are and why you're there, and the people who have supported you. But ultimately, you just kind of trust where God has put you, and trust that He has a plan for you and where you are. If you're sitting on a bus after a 6-game road trip and you haven't seen your family in 2 months, and you're like, man, should I continue doing this? And you just you have those conversations with yourself, and it is. It's refreshing if you can take the time to put yourself in those scenarios, to have those conversations with yourself and in prayer. And I mean, it does. For me, it did remotivate me. And again, like I said, those weekly chapel sessions are always good to kind of collaborate a lot.
That is great.
You're all kind of going through the same thing, and it does help motivate you when you kind of feel and hear the other players speak on how it's going in their life as well.
Obviously, you're back at home now, but like you said, that the weekly chapel helped you in Mount St. Mary's. But how was the adjustment of moving all the way across the country from Maryland to California? I can't imagine two more different states. I mean, to me, that I go to Lacey, Washington. I'm still pretty, I'm close to my family here, but just tell me what that experience was like, going from East Coast to West Coast. I can't imagine.
Yeah, it's nuts. California was nuts. The very first professional contract was with Winnipeg, which is in Canada. So that was the craziest. California, by the time California rolled around with San Diego, that was like a slice of pie, because it's in the United States. it's good just to be in the United States.
Exactly.
And I was with an affiliated organization. So, it's definitely not easy. I mean, you're flying around, you're leaving your family. That's the hardest thing, is when you're leaving your family and you're going out there and you're trying to do something. It makes it hard. It's hard to stay motivated with it, but you just try to keep your eye on what you're trying to accomplish and take every day. It sounds cliche, but one day at a time.
I mean, yeah, like I said, one day at a time sounds cliche, but it's 100% true.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the biggest thing for me is just leaving my family. I had my wife at the time, and actually, the first year of San Diego, we were engaged, and the second year we were married when I was in AA, and I was in Texas. But yeah, it's just part, it's part of the game, and it's tough, but you just kind of grind through it.
All right, so we're looking to wrap up a little bit here. Before we go, and I'm not trying to take stuff out of your e-guide or anything. I'm not trying to reveal anything, but if you can get what's kind of two major tenets in the e-guide that kind of defines what you're trying to do with Lokationnation. What's two maybe philosophies or methods you use in the e-guide without revealing too much. I'm not trying to give away your product, but what are some of the big things people can expect, some mind-blowing things in the e-guide?
Yeah, so I mean, the two of the main things I think they're early on in the e-guide. I think a lot of guys would, for what it's worth, a lot of people I think would enjoy the two things I have prior to any of my writing, which is the preface by one of the players I used to coach, Thomas Williams, who has a master's in kinesiology, biomechanics, with how he evaluated my mechanical cue for command. I thought that is something that would be greatly of interest to people, anybody who's interested in the mechanical adjustment. And then right after him in the e-guide, I have Brian Hertzog, a 9-year professional umpire, talking about the importance of stand.
That's a great insight. Absolutely, umpires. I mean, think they're everything to the strike zone. So that's really unique. Yeah, that's a good twist. That's good, Dustin.
I think a lot of people are gonna, as Lokationnation continues, and I continue to utilize the help and efforts of umpires in my efforts to prove the importance of location. I think a lot of people are going to have to open their eyes to how umpires see what happens, how they call pitches, what locations they think are most effective. These are guys that are eyewitnessing games every night. That's something that's going to be of interest, I think, as Lokationnation furthers as well. But those are the first two things. But aside from those first two things, the two main parts, I think, that drive the e-guide, are early on. One of the first two chapters, the paradigm shift, which is chapter 1. Basically talking about the importance of changing your entire thought process and how you see the pitching world. Which everybody goes through their entire life hearing the ideas of velocity. That is the only way to be successful. It is the only way to advance in the game. And the idea of the paradigm shift, paradigms are how you kind of view the world and how you interact with the world. And, to change the way you think about what success means to you, and that command and location is what will ultimately bring you the most success. If you don't change your paradigm and how you view the world of pitching, you won't be a commanding pitcher. You will never be able to achieve that. So I think that is the most important and vital aspect, early on in the book, and then following that up with the repetition and release point chapter, just talking about the importance of repetition. And I kind of outline very specifically things that go on neurologically with with science, and I have a Stanford grad in there who I've used to talk about the effects of myelin in the brain, how it affects your ability to repeat your motion, increase how you move, your movements. All of that is vitally important to creating command. And I think those first two pieces of right there early on in the e-guide are of great interest. The rest of it is all definitely very important. I laid out a guide at the end of the book for a 6-week fastball command. But I think a lot of the information I've gotten, a lot of people have really enjoyed the first chapter of the paradigm shift, how you see the world of pitching and what you really want out of your career.
Well, it's clear that anyone looking to buy Dustin's e-guide, he's done his homework. I mean, he's got college grads in there. He's got, plenty of science and plenty of personal experience. So personally, I haven't picked up the e-guide yet, but I'm looking to pick it up as soon as possible. But just thank you so much for coming on, Dustin. Great that you come on, talk about your experiences, talk about this new mission, and it was great to have you on here. Thank you very much.
No problem. I appreciate you having me on, and I hope to talk to you more in the future about it.